Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Verona Gosnet, and you are tuned into the Universal Sportsman channel for the very first time. We are very proud to say that this is our very first broadcast. We are bringing you the live debate between Richard York and Dr. Gerard Verdoorn, and the theme of the debate is the breeding of color variants in the game industry. We hope you enjoy it, and please, if you cannot watch the whole debate, go to our website afterwards and you can go and watch it then again. And yes, enjoy. Thank you.
Dames en heren, baie hartlike Waterberg welkom by julle almal. My naam is Ken Moore, ek is die huidige voorsitter van die Waterberg Natuurbewarings. Waterberg Nature Conservancy, as you can see from up here, is all about providing education, providing information, and making people aware of the three principal issues we're involved in. The first is wildlife in all its wide variety of forms. The second is the environment, which includes bush, air, and water. And the third is dealing with our historical background. Before we start the debate this evening, there are a few housekeeping rules I'd like to run through with you. This is the first time ever this has been live streamed over the internet, and many thousands of people are looking at it as we speak. So we're running on a very tight time schedule, and we must adhere to the program. So I'm going to be rather strict in keeping to the program, if you do not mind. Secondly, we have the Eskom problems, but I believe we may have solved that by Boer maak 'n plan. Ons het 'n kragopwekker daar agter en hy werk nou vir ons. Third issue is toilets. There are toilets through the door there where you came in. Daar's dames op die linkerkant en 'n mans op jou regterkant. Next, I want to say that after the debate, which will finish at 6 o'clock sharp, there will be a 10-minute leg stretch and some refreshments will be available at the back. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Waterberg Academy for making their facilities available to us for this important event. They do wonderful work here in the Waterberg, and thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. The breeding of color variants is a very topical issue. It's also very controversial. Being an organization which thrives on educating people, making people aware and informing them of what is happening in the Waterberg, we thought there would be no better way than to have an open debate. And we've invited two very prominent people to present their arguments or their discussions to you on color variants. The first to speak this evening will be Richard York. Richard is a full-time commercial cattle farmer and game rancher. He's also a qualified professional hunter who has enjoyed being involved in the wildlife industry. He has successfully conserved the color variant golden wildebeest. I am telling you that Richard is a member of many different organizations, and tonight he's here in his personal capacity. Speaking against color variants is Dr. Gerard Verdoorn on my left here, your right. He's the current president of the South African Hunters and Game Conservation Association. With an MSc in synthetic organic chemistry and a prestigious list of conservation awards to his name, Gerard has lectured at the universities of Johannesburg, Pretoria, Witwatersrand, Stellenbosch, and the Tshwane universities of technology. He has published more than 80 peer-reviewed papers in organic chemistry, photochemistry, avian genetics, toxicology, and general ornithology. Ladies and gentlemen, the idea is to make you aware of the debate that is going on. It is not the job of Waterberg Nature Conservancy to tell you to be in favor of color variants or against. We ask you to have an open mind this evening, to listen to the presentations and to keep an orderly control here. The terms of engagement are as follows. Each of the presenters will talk for 10 minutes and do his presentation. After both of them have talked for 10 minutes, there will be a 5-minute response by the other to the first or to the other person. After that 5-minute response by each of them, we are going to throw it open to questions to the floor. Because there are so many people here and because of the emotional controversy this debate has caused, I do ask you not to make it personal, to keep it as scientific and as objective as you can. I'm going to suggest that we have one question per audience member. I don't want more than one person asking a number of questions because it will not allow the other participants in this meeting to participate. So on with the debate. First up is Mr. Richard York.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute privilege to be here tonight. As South Africa's greatest statesman, leader, humanitarian, Nelson Mandela was a proud hunter, conservationist, and in an article dated 5th of April 1991, Mandela told the Weekly Mail that I believe it was vital to promote environmental conservation and to devise new methods to protect our fast-dwindling plant and animal species. It is our duty as conservationists to fulfill the beliefs and ensure that the conservation and rural development is combined for the benefit of our industry and communities. Good evening, Dr. Gerard van Doren. I am privileged to say that I've grown up around the hunting campfires of the Bushveld and have been privileged to witness some of the best conservationists in the world, the hunter. I've got a great turmoil in me tonight because I'm being asked to debate against something I believe in, something I hold dear, the hunting market. The colour variant market, the breeding of colour variants, is exceptionally crucial to our industry. And for me to prove that, I've actually got to disparage and hurt the hunting industry, something I do not intend doing, but something if forced to, I will do. I'm a proud member of FASA, South African Hunters, and Safari Club International. However, it is important that we realize hunting is the finest management tool at a game rancher's disposal. There is no better utilization of natural resources than hunting. Hunting is the utilization of our wildlife and the utilization of our environmental species. However, recent market media trends, this document here, and I hope you've got one too, Mr. Van Doren, was a media statement released by SA Hunters in which they condemned and asked for the government to intervene and regulate the wildlife ranching industry, something which I believe will not hurt the wildlife ranching industry, but will hurt the hunting industry. And we are already starting to see the repercussions of that. The wildlife industry has continued as if nothing's happened. The hunting industry has taken a bad knock. So I'd like to quickly just play something so that I'm not accused of taking words out of context, so bear with me.
Sy was een van die minstaatsamptenare wat hulle job gedoen het. As jy deesdae staat toe gaan om iemand te kry om 'n job te doen, is bitter moeilik. Die staat het tot dusver sy mandaat vir bewaring nie nagekom. Ek sê dit vir met openheid en eerlikheid.
I don't know if you guys could hear that. Basically, it's Mr. Van Doren telling us in his second media release that the state cannot do its job and that one of the few people who could do its job was Lizanne Nel, but that the state cannot currently manage with the current requests to deal with our environmental situations. So my question is, I find it a little bit perplexed that in our first media release, we are asking the state to intervene and to pose regulations on the wildlife ranching industry, But in a second media statement, Dr. Van Doren's recorded as saying is that the state cannot manage with the regulations they currently have. So how is it viable for us to impose more regulations on an organization that can already not manage with the regulations it has to adhere to? Breeding of color variants in the game ranching industry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Waterberg. It's an exceptional privilege for me to be here tonight as a fellow Waterbergtorian, or as the Afrikaner community would say, a Waterberger. Jy sien die hele ding draai om persepsies en wat die mense daar buite van ons dink. Perceptions, arguably the biggest crux of tonight's debate. Not perceptions, misperceptions. Could all the people here tonight who are opposed to recessive mutants, freaks, and agree with the statement launched in the magazines kindly raise their hands? 1, 2. Okay, please keep your hands up. 3. Right. Keep your hands up high. If you have brown eyes, if you don't have brown eyes, kindly put your hands down because you are recessive. If you don't have brown hair, kindly put your hands down because you are recessive. If you don't have dimples, put your hands down because you are recessive. If you don't have a widow's peak, yet again, you are recessive. If you don't have curly hair, you are recessive. If you don't have freckles, you are recessive. If you don't have more than 5 fingers, if you have 5 fingers, ladies and gentlemen, you are recessive. Polydactyly is a dominant gene in which you have more than 5 fingers. So every person here today sitting has got recessive genes within them. Dwarfism is a dominant gene. Polled cattle, cattle that do not have horns naturally, is a dominant gene. So in other words, the cattle that can defend themselves and have horns are recessive. If we look at tuskless elephants, it's a dominant gene. Recessive is the elephants with tusks. So the question we need to ask ourselves tonight is, we've all got genes. We can't change it. Should we condemn certain recessive genes when we ourselves have recessive genes, when all animals are made up of dominant and recessive genes? Point number 1 for tonight that I want you to understand: not all recessive genes and not all dominant genes are good or bad for you. If we look at the king cheetah was supported by the EWT and was supported by the IUCN, or the World Conservation Union. In the mammals of the Southern African sub-region, Skinner and Smithers describe it, and they describe Van Dyke's breeding research project. The first one recorded is in 1927 and was a skin found in Zimbabwe. If we look at color variants throughout the history, and I'm going to run through this quickly, these are all the variants within the cat species. You get lions, tigers, bears. The spirit bear, very interesting point here. The spirit bear, the white bear, is actually more adapted at catching fish than its counterpart black bear. A color variant is better than its original. Why? Because during the day, it doesn't reflect as much on the water's surface. So it's up to 50% more effective at catching fish. Now, you'll see its receptor there is MC1R, which causes the color variant. Ironically, that's the same variant that's been identified in mammals. So animals that existed billions of years ago were already color variants. They were already examples of color variants. Let's take the crocodile. The crocodile is recorded as being unchanged for the last 160 million years. Ladies and gentlemen, as humans, we have only been here for the last 3 million years. But yet there's such a thing as a golden crocodile. Why? Because color variants have existed for eons. Let's go to Europe. These are all the color morphs of the red fox. There you get the deer. Okay? There you've got the melanistic deer. You've got Cape white lappet vultures. You've got white wildebeest in the Tanzania, Serengeti, white wildebeest in Zambia. Madikwe Game Reserve publicized itself and made massive income through promoting the yellow morph crimson-breasted shrike. They also promoted the strawberry leopard. Why is it that we are willing to accept when organizations breed with color variants like the king cheetah, it's fine. When they support it, it's fine. When nature parks promote it, it's fine. But now because game farmers are preserving and conserving a natural resource, we are condemning it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make one point and one point very clear tonight. To condemn color variance is to condemn evolution in its entirety. You get leucistic hyenas, melanistic zebras. Let's go to Cape Nature. Cape Nature, another government organization that tried to rebreed the quagga. When was SA Hunter saying about that? Marine animals, white waterbuck in the Kruger. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just some of the color variants, and the list goes on and on and on. Golden wildebeest. This golden wildebeest occurred naturally along the Limpopo province, along the free-roaming Thule block animals, measuring 32 inches, one of the biggest ever recorded. Free-roaming, freely caught. Look between these wildebeest. Just like humans, that we've got a variation between us, so too is there a variation between wildebeest. There's no two wildebeest that are the same. So I want tonight that if we are going to condemn color variance, that we must condemn every single variation between the normal species as well. This is 1986, a black impala recorded in Kruger National Park. 1906, the hunt of a golden gemsbuck. Here they write, thus it was seen that a golden gemsbuck was an animal to covet, to kill, to preserve, and to boast over. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 1906, hunting color variance. SCI accepts color variance. In their statement they say, an impala, the black impala is not a subspecies, but a color phase of the southern impala that was developed by selective breeding. They also say that they accept selective breeding then, by other words. Because if they were opposed to it, they would have said that they were opposed to selective breeding. They would not have accepted it in its record books. White springbuck, white blesbuck, all the same. There are the same amount of white blesbuck, copper springbuck, and black springbuck hunted as normal springbuck. Why must we deprive South Africa of the opportunity to have such a greater variety of animals and species? This buffalo, the world record buffalo of 40 million, was bred in an extensive system. If we compare it to history of old, the Roland Ward, the accusations made that we're breeding freaks. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not true. Not a single one of South Africa's buffalo even make this list. Not one. Even the buffalo that was sold for 50 million doesn't even make the top 17. For 40 million, my apologies. So where did the buffalo in Madikwe and Kruger and Pilansberg come from? Ladies and gentlemen, from the zoos of Europe. A large majority of them came from the zoos of Europe and the quarantine zones below Kruger. So the question we need to ask ourselves today, are the animals that we breed in captivity, they're not going to lose their adaptability. They will be able to be used. As farmers and ranchers, we have the right to create a sustainable income from the utilization of natural resources. And that right is through breeding with color variance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Dr. Gerard Verdoorn, you're next up. If we can get this one there, maybe you want to...
Good evening, folks. I would like to start by apologizing for my English, because where I come from, we only speak that language in self-defense. Nevertheless, I'll try and do my best to give you the perception from SA Hunters about color variations. And I would like to start off by thanking the Waterbuck Conservancy and all these wonderful people out here for inviting us to participate in this debate. It's something which is close to our hearts, and for me personally, I can see all. For me personally, it's always been something to tell people. First of all, I'm a conservationist with massive passion. I've worked in conservation ever since I opened my eyes, and later on became a hunter. I did stop hunting for a while because I got a bit sick and tired of all the bad practices, but I started hunting again in 1998, and I also understand, like the previous speaker, that hunting, as recognized by the IUCN, is one of the pillars of conservation. But I'm always thinking about hunting and conservation and what the real issue about conservation hunting is. And to me, it's about the future, not about what we've got now. Because we sit here, we are privileged to have lots of wild game around us, we're privileged to be able to hunt. My question is, what about my son, who's 7 years old now? What about their children? What about the future generations that will have to utilize the wildlife and enjoy the wildlife? Not only that, there's also the question for me, as a bunnyhugger, and I must admit that tonight, I'm a real bunnyhugger. What about the animals themselves? There's also, to me, a wildlife welfare issue. Now, in any wild population, you heard it tonight, there's always the norm, and within the population, if you take a thin line and you look at all the genetics, there's always going to be recessive genetics within that population. And these recessive genetics are there naturally. We can't dispute that. If you look at the wild population of things like springbuck in the Karoo, you see the odd white one, you see the odd black one, etc., etc. In most cases, these recessive genes, and I'm talking about the South African animals, are highly localized in particular areas. And you don't find them in very big numbers. Now, when you do find that these particular recessive genes come forward in the population, then you see them odds and ends here and there. And in the Limpopo province in particular, I love to hunt in that area because it's still wild and you've got large wilderness areas. I've seen black impala, I've seen very dark kudu, I've seen things like very dark giraffe as well. But you never find them in huge numbers anywhere in the wild population. And what I'm going to say there to you in these particular words is the fact that these animals do occur is undisputable. But they are there in very, very small numbers. Generally, if you look at the ones coming out of the population, like the golden gnu and things like these, they are uniform in the coat color. And one of you should ask the question, but why don't we see huge numbers of golden wildebeest or black impala or whatever else color coat you might find in the population? It is all about the adaptability. And the adaptability is what makes a species go forward. If you believe in evolution, Darwinism, it'll tell you it's survival of the fittest, or the survival of the most adaptable amongst the animals. And to give an example of how things can change in London, the very famous moth that used to live there for millions of years was always white. And as the city became more polluted, the buildings became more dark. And the white moths started dying out, and the black ones that were there as recessive ones, they started multiplying to adapt to that dark environment. And then around the 60s, London was cleaned up again. And what happened when the buildings started becoming white because of washing, the white ones came back. So nature responded to a situation which was imposed upon it by itself. And therefore, these things develop over time, not because of mankind's intervention. Now, what happens, what we see in South Africa and a few other parts, maybe in Southern Africa, is that the selective breeding for selective coat coloration. And that's where people select the white ones, the leucistic ones, or the melanistic ones, or the erythristic ones, which are more the yellowish and the red ones, so on. They select them. For some reason, they believe they're valuable. Some people regard them as good-looking or beautiful. And what we see lately, the last couple of years, is all these funny animals that look as if they are Nguni cattle. They've got these, you can only call them pied colorations on their bodies. And the latest one we've seen in a magazine was a little klipspringer with a white blotch over the body. And what we say as SA hunters, what I say as a person who knows something about genetics, is that the anthropomorphic invention to escalate those recessive genes in the population is what we call domestication. So we don't allow the population to breed up. You've got a black impala here and there, you've got a dark kudu, or you've got a white springbuck. We take them out of the population and we start breeding them up, and we basically domesticate the animals by intervening in the selection process, which is not natural now, and proliferating the numbers in that particular situation. Now, it's not just about the genetics. Mother Nature will make a plan. If you do have some escapees from a farm where they breed a color aberration, it goes to the wild population. It will certainly be worked out of the system over a couple of generations in the wild population. We're concerned about this, but we're also concerned about the secondary impacts on the biodiversity. And as a hunting organization, our first beat in life is to talk about conservation, long before we talk about the right and the privilege to hunt them. Now, if you look at these things, starting off with the inbreeding, because that's what is done to take black out of the population, to take some more black and start breeding, is you basically shift the heterozygosity of the animals to homozygosity. In other words, you reduce the genetic diversity in the population by taking out these individuals and mating them selectively, unlike Mother Nature would have left them out on their own to breed on their own. And this not only gives you the privilege of having a good number of black or yellow or white or pink or blue, whatever you want, but it also results in reduced fecundity. In other words, reduced ability to breed successfully. It compromises adaptability, and there are many papers about that in this country and abroad, and also anatomical challenges. We've heard now that some people say, but some of the springbok has stunted jaws and stuff like that. So that is the impact from a genetic point of view. What we see over the country, if you fly over the Waterberg and other parts of the country now with a helicopter, you see that used to be wild areas, huge wild areas, now into small camps where people breed these animals. And most of the camps are electrified to keep the carnivores out. And what I've seen myself in photograph was pangolins on electrified fencing being killed, tortoises, scarab beetles, in other words, dung beetles, terrestrial birds, and small carnivores. So once they get into that electrified fence, it's basically doomsday for them. I'm also a consultant for the whole game ranching industry and the livestock industry in terms of responsible wildlife management when it comes to predation management. And what's alarming to me is the number of calls that escalated from the game ranching arena in the last couple of years because of the breeding of these color aberrants, because the animals are highly valuable and people are scared about what's going to happen to the wildlife if the things with the claws and the fangs come in. And there's, I believe, wanton persecution. So it is busy establishing a prey and predator-prey imbalance, and there's a lot of persecution of even the mesocarnivores like brown hyenas and things like the Manar jackals or the aardwolf. I also see a lot of misuse of herbicides because people want to clear their fences or their lands or wherever they keep the animals of the woody plants to get more grass into the system. I'm concerned about the fact that there's all sort of supplements given to animals to give them believed to be better fecundity and better horn growth. And then from a chemical perspective, as somebody working in the agrochemical arena, is the control of ecto and endoparasites by dosing and dipping the animals. And in all respects, that cannot be done effectively with animals in the camp where you don't do proper dipping and dosing, and you either underdose or you overdose, and that results in the generation of populations of these parasites that are resistant to these things. But I'm going to finish my presentation now because not enough time. I had the shock of my life when I went to one of our ranches recently, and somebody invited me to come along to go and shoot springbok. And the first thing I asked, hoeveel kost die damn goed? And they said, no, it's for free. I said, there's no ways in the world you can hunt for free. He says, no, the friend of his in the Karoo has a farm with camps with copper springbok, and they shoot out all the free-roaming springbok so that those animals cannot contaminate the copper springbok. To me, that was a very big, sad eye-opener. And another friend of mine told me that he was approached by some youngsters who came onto this farm, and they offered him 6,000 rand for Impala U, all the Impala U's in his farm. And he said, but why so much money? I normally sell them for 1,200 bucks. They said, but they're busy breeding black Impala. The rams are going down in body size, and they need to bring in other genetics to elevate the body size again to make them normal size. So that is the thing that we're concerned about. So to conclude with, I just want to give you the last and the final comment from me as a hunter conservationist. As a hunter, to me, hunting is the fair chase of a free-roaming wild animal in his natural state, in his natural habitat, with the best chance of escaping. We do not hunt domesticated animals. If they're selectively bred for whatever purpose, and you shoot them, it is shooting. It is not hunting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Now, as I said earlier in the proceedings, Richard's going to have a 5-minute opportunity to respond to Gerard's comments, and following that, Gerard will have 5 minutes to respond to Richard.
Sorry, firstly, I'd like to respond to some of Dr. van Duren's statements. Not once did he address the issue at hand, the real issue at hand, calling for government regulation. When is this issue going to be addressed? Secondly, he mentioned that he stopped hunting for a reason, because of the bad practices within individuals. Then he mentions small bad practices within the game ranching industry and tries to use that to justify the government regulation on our industry. How is that just? Can we as game ranchers, should we show all the unjust things that hunters do and then call for government regulation because of small individuals? Then he spoke about inbreeding and saying that because we breed with black impala, we inbreed. But yet in the same vein, they're complaining about the price of normal breeding stock going up, the price of normal impala. So if I'm taking normal impala and putting them with a black ram, is that inbreeding? No, that is outbreeding. With color variants, we are outbreeding. We are not inbreeding. Inbreeding was done with the king cheetah because they thought that it was a subspecies, not a color variant. Secondly, or thirdly, to blame wildlife ranching for chemicals is a misjustice on the industry. You should be blaming the chemical industries for not regulating themselves properly, not for the farmers who are misinformed. As a conservationist, we should be providing guidance, not calling for government regulation and punishing people. We should be educating, the same way WRSA does. Okay, biodiversity business is a commercial enterprise that generates profit through production processes which conserve biodiversity. That's exactly what we do. Now I'm going to skip a couple of slides here, and I'm going to go straight into the heart of it. Dr. van Duren's point about hunting is the fair chase of free-roaming wild animals in their natural state and natural habitat is completely wrong. Natural states, natural habitats don't exist, and let's look at the IUC definitions why. Biodiversity. This includes the diversity within species, ladies and gentlemen. It includes all life. It includes all variation. So in our biodiversity of the International World Conservation Union, they tell us that all life within a species is part of biodiversity. They tell us that conservation we should protect within or outside of their natural environments. We should protect animals within or outside their natural environments. That's crucial. And then finally, they define intensive management, where they say conditions of captivity or confinement. Animals in conditions of captivity or confinement. So let's put it to you this way. As a game rancher, no matter what the size of my farm, be it extensive or semi-intensive, what do I need to apply from the state? What regulations does the state already enforce on me? Is a P3 exemption. The state requires me to have a P3 exemption to legally be able to own the animals on my property. Right, so what does that mean? A P3 exemption is where a farm has adequate enclosure to prevent the game movement in or out of the property. So in other words, if we go back to intensive management, conditions of captivity or confinement. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say is, there is no such thing as a natural environment anymore. There is no such thing as a free natural state. We as humans are here, we as game ranchers are here and have to benefit the animals. Now I'm going to take you through a step quickly. SA Hunters hides behind the word conservation. It's a facade. Absolute facade. When a hunter comes to my farm, he pays me money to be on my farm, to traverse on my farm, and to shoot and kill an animal on my farm. What benefit is he providing to conservation during that time frame? Anything? All he's doing is shooting an animal. What benefit he is doing is he is taking money and he is giving it to us as the game ranchers, and the game ranchers are putting it back into conservation. So for SA hunters to blame us and say that we have turned wildlife into a commodity is unjust. Hunters turned wildlife into a commodity. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to reiterate, I'm a proud hunter, I'm a proud conservationist, but I'm a proud breeder of the most functionally efficient wild animal there is, the golden wildebeest, and I'll continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Gerard, for your response.
Chairman, there's so many things to respond to. I don't know where to start. The issue of regulation comes about the fact not because people have extensive wildlife ranches, and we have many members who are extensive wildlife ranchers themselves. I hunted those farms. They're my friends, they're my buddies. And we often have debates about conservation of farms and stuff like this. And that's not the issue. The issue comes in where you start intervening in the population. Natural selection says there will be impala. They will look about the same with red and a certain horn type and a horn size, etc., etc. It will dictate. There will be a black one now and again. The white might be one with a black spot on the nose or a pink bum for that reason. But the moment you start hand-picking those individuals out and start breeding, you do inbreeding. What Richard said is right. They outbreeding the poor genetics of black impala that was created by inbreeding by using normal impala to outbreed the poor genetics. That's 100%. That is what the issue is about the survival of species in the long term, that you stop domesticating them and allow wild to be wild. And the reason why we ask government to start intervening is because what used to be wilderness areas with large tracts of game farms is now being cut into smaller portions. And exactly what I showed you, go to some of the game farms, not saying all of them, some of them, and you walk along the fence, you find the dead tortoises there. You find the dead scarab beetles by the buckets full, and the moment you start messing with the scarab beetles, you're creating a welfare issue for the wildlife out there. Coming back to the chemical issue, and I always have to talk about the chemical issue because I'm a chemist myself, I'm a consultant for the industry, and when I see an advert for game feed with ivermectin tablets, I get the damn shivers. Because there's no way you can feed a game animal an effective dose of ivermectin to control endoparasites. You might either underdose or overdose, and whichever way you do it, it's going to generate a resistant parasite that will spill over into other game animals and to the cattle and the sheep and stuff out there, which creates a compromised situation for the whole red meat and the wool and the mohair growing industry. So that is the stuff that we should take into account. Now, saying to me that there's no natural rand or no wilderness areas, or what was the story you said, no wild areas, I'm not so sure about that, because the place where I go and hunt, walk on 5,000 or 10,000 hectare farms, which are huge, open wilderness areas, natural areas, there is very little, if any, human intervention there. It's completely different from a camp where you've got a couple of animals in small enclosures. And let me give you 2 examples. I had a call from a person, I won't mention names, up in Limpopo Valley some 2 years ago, complaining about the fact that jackals were taking out the impala lambs. I said, okay, but have you got a big game farm? He said, yes, 20 hectares of game farm. That is not a game farm. It's a patch of land that shouldn't even have 1 cockroach, let alone 5 or 10 impala. That's the difference between extensive game ranching and intensive breeding. They are wilderness areas. So if a hunter goes and I hunt on a farm with a couple of thousand hectares, even 1,800 hectares, that is hunting an animal in a fair chase, natural environment, natural system, animals got a chance to get away. Not to come and tell me, like somebody told me, but once we start having excess of these golden or pink or blue animals, we will allow you hunters to come and hunt them. It's not hunting, that is shooting. So I don't agree with the fact that there's no wilderness areas. There's definitely a lot of wilderness areas. And many of the game ranchers still have wide open stretches of land where they do those sort of things. And I think about the rest, I'll keep the Fifth Amendment.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to take questions from the floor. If you wouldn't mind, raise your hand, and if I could then identify you And if you could address your question to one of the two debaters, preferably, I will repeat it so others can hear, and then they'll respond. Gentleman at the back there, your name, sir? Thank you very much. The short question there, for those who didn't hear, was why breed with specific color variants and not with a wider range of animals?
To answer your question, Marius, I breed with one of the most endangered and threatened species in this country, the white rhino. I put my life on risk for the white rhino. We invest in the white rhino. We conserve the white rhino. Now, you ask, why do they not exist in natural populations of abundant numbers? It's very easy to explain, ladies and gentlemen. It's a recessive gene. So in other words, if I have 100 golden females and one blue wildebeest male mates them, they'll all be blue again. Do we understand that? So in terms of numbers, in terms of odds, it's against them. And that's the same way that Sambi justified them as not a threat to our natural populations. I hope I've answered your questions.
Thank you. Next question. Sorry, is there a question there? Yes, sir. Your name? Thank you. Thank you, Vili. The question for Dr. Verdoorn, as I understand it, is why do the color variants demand so much money and the others not?
I think it's I think the base of the question is why do hunters seek out the best amongst the wild population if they hunt? Am I right? That's the base of the question. Okay. I'm going to make a distinction between the trophy hunter and the hunter. The trophy hunter is the person who goes and looks for that special animal. And most of the trophy hunters would like to shoot a kudu of 54 inches plus, or a buffalo 40 inches or whatever. So there is a small percentage of people that go to all the extent and all the expenses to go and shoot those special animals. Amongst the normal hunters like myself, we hunt the animals because we require the meat. I don't even take the skins of the animals because I'll leave them on the farm for the farmer to do whatever they want. So I don't think one should paint everybody with the same brush when it comes to shooting out the special ones. And yeah, there's allegations that hunters were also responsible for taking out the good animals. And I know for a fact, when I was a kid, my dad used to buy me guns and ammo and shooting times, and there were these pictures of rows and rows of African people walking with these elephant tusks that weighed 80 to 100 pounds. I always thought to myself, when will this stop? It has stopped because nothing left, because some hunters took it out. And yes, that's why I stopped hunting for a while, because I was really, the Afrikaans word is the best word, gatvol, of the way people misuse wildlife and not utilize wildlife. So yes, there's a problem. But amongst the normal hunters, there's a very strong move away from seeking out the best and the biggest on the farm, because we understand you must leave that good animal out there to breed and to see the genetics in the wild population to give the best for the future coming forward. And we eventually hunt them when they're very old. But we would like to take out the normal animal, and we will like to pay a fair price for that. And there are people that will want to hunt a black or a blue or a pink or a hairy animal like that. But that's the exception. That's not the normal rule amongst the normal hunters.
Thank you, Gerard. Barry, you have a question? Keep it brief, because there are other people who have questions as well. Thank you.
Believe that the future of our industry will go forward if we're open and transparent and accountable for our actions, so we have nothing to hide. Constructive criticism is welcome. Constructive advice is welcome. Destructive accusations are rejected in its entirety. Okay, let me finish, sir. You've called for regulations. What are those regulations? And what will those regulations achieve? You want extensive systems. What does government think of extensive systems? Have you asked government? They say extensive systems, be it right or wrong, are a waste of land. They're elitist playgrounds for rich people. Maybe I'm talking to some here. It's not what I say, it's what government says. They make no contribution to food security. They are less productive than the more intensively managed systems. I asked our honourable member of SA Hunters, Razan Nel at FASA, show us how to do it. We have a 4,000 hectare game farm for you in the Waterberg. Come and buy it. Come and lead by example. You know what the answer was? It's not economically viable. Our model is not economically viable. So what are you trying to achieve? What is your end game? To bring in more regulation? To make us go broke? So you can have cheap hunting? Thank you.
Did everyone hear that? Gerard, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Barry, for your question and your statement out there. The objective of SA Hunters is not to make anybody go bankrupt or broke. What we're saying is that if you start taking a farm let's say of X number of hectares, and you start putting in 20 or 30 camps, there's going to be an environmental impact. I showed you the pictures. If you don't agree that electrified fencing is taking, let me finish please, if you're civilized. If you electrify the place in the incorrect fashion, there's going to be environmental impacts. If you overstock, there's going to be environmental impacts. There's nothing different from anybody else doing something on the land which is not sustainable. We fight people about the fracking in the Karoo. We fight about other things, mining and stuff like this. And I believe that a certain small sector of the game ranching industry, with the intensive breeding of, amongst others, color variants and excessive horn-sized animals, are having an unacceptable environmental impact. I was on a farm recently, not too far from here, where the people told me they're using a D8 to take out all the shrubbery below the big trees that they can have a grassland environment in the savannah. The question is, what about the other organisms? It's not just about the buck that live in the place. Mother Nature is a smorgasbord of millions of creatures out there and thousands of species that utilize the habitat. The moment you alter the plant ecology, you take away the animal ecology. So there's an environmental impact. And what we're saying, there needs to be a look into what needs to be done in order to minimize that environmental impact. Just like the Department of Environmental Affairs will look at a mining application, or looking at an application for fracking in the Karoo, or looking at an application to build a new township somewhere. There has to be a look into this. What is the environmental impact? And government knows about this. And if government tells you that excessive areas are unproductive, they must listen to themselves, because in the Constitution, they have an obligation to conserve the wildlife of the country and the biodiversity. They are under obligation, according to Convention of Biodiversity, to make sure they conserve the biodiversity, not only for South Africa, for the entire globe. So government needs a wake-up call. And I think Edna Molewa has had the wake-up call. She knows, and she gave an order to the people to come up with a study to show what is the current situation. And we're not saying remove color variants. We're not saying remove intensive breeding. We say come to a point where you minimize the impact. And if it means that it has to have a certain impact on certain people, yes, so be. And I told my own members recently that if we have to pay more for that animal that we hunt, which is a normal animal, we have to pay a bit more. Not excessive price, but you have to pay a bit more. And we're not there to tell people you're not allowed to make money or have to go bankrupt. We never said that.
Thank you, Gerard. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can gather, this is a very controversial subject, and emotions can run high. So I'm going to take another 3 questions. We have 7 minutes before we're going to have a refreshment break. This gentleman here has his hand up. Sir, can you introduce yourself?
Dr. van Doorn. There's a little bit of a misconception out there, and I'd just like to set the record straight. SA hunters only represents less than 15% of hunters in South Africa. Firstly. Secondly, we're talking about the prices of game. Now, as a consumptive user of an animal, the game prices shouldn't affect you, because you shouldn't be shooting Impala ewes that are on auction. You shouldn't be shooting trophy rams that are on auction. And the animals that aren't on auction are the animals that you should be shooting. Those prices are virtually unaffected. Now, I'd like an answer from you as to why you want to shoot ewes and trophies. Because if you are complaining about the prices of these animals, it means you want to hunt them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A very valid question. Let me answer the question. We do not want to hunt the animals that go onto auction. Most definitely not. But the secondary impact of what's happening now with this intensive breeding and the selection for color aberrations and stuff like this is the fact. And I got the email this morning from one of our senior members. They booked 2 hunts, one in the Free State and one in the Limpopo province, close to where I hunt in the Mapungupo area. And as they were about to depart for their hunting trip, the farmer phoned up and said, remember this year, the impalas are $4,000 for a ram and $3,200 for a ewe. Same time in the Free State, they said, but now the blessed buck of 4,000 rand. And the reason for that is they can fetch more by selling these to a game breeder and selling it to a hunter. So there is a secondary impact. And yeah, I've got to look at the normal hunters out there, and I've got to have a bit of sympathy and empathy for that, because I'm privileged on having a place where I can go and hunt at very reasonable prices. So, but we don't want to hunt those animals that go in auction because we can't afford them. We don't want to hunt a black impala. I don't want to hunt one anyway. Thank you.
Gentleman on the aisle there. Yes, sir. Your name, please. Enige een, maak nie saak nie.
Ek sal dit self byt my Engels doen. Al wat ek by jou wil weet, dokter, is as jy nou sê daar's nou 400 hektaar stuk grond, daai stuk grond is marginaal. Jy kan niks anders af doen. Jy kan nie tomaties plant nie, jy kan nie bees staan nie, jy kan nie bokke aanhou nie. Daar lê daai stukkie grond nou, okay? En jy sê vir jouself in jou leeftyd wat jy gesien het, is dat oral die ekstensiewe plase wat jy van praat, 1000, 1800, 2000 hektar plase, jy kan nie meer daar kom in 'n kudu wil sien wat lyk soos op die Roland word nie. Die goed lyk net al hoe kleiner. Ek het 'n buurman gehad met 'n 300 hektar plaas wat 15 jaar kudu's opgehad het. Daai kudu's het so springbokke begin lyk. So ek besef net dat 'n mens moet so 'n stelsel manage. Maak nou nie saak of dit 1000 hektar, 1800 hektar of die kreer wildtuin is nie. Daar's verskillende, daar's natuurbewaringsareas, die wildtuine, maar dan is daar ook plase wat marginaal is wat hou op wil boer. Hulle wil boer met die goed, okay? En die enigste manier wat jy dit kan doen is jy moet dit manage. En al hoe jy dit gaan doen is jy gaan diere van buite af inbring en uitdruk om die genetika gesond en reg te hou. Verstaan ek dit verkeerd of maak dit sin?
Thank you, meneer. For those who don't understand Afrikaans, basically the question is, there are horses for courses. If you have small properties and you're wanting to breed, they're uneconomical for any other means. Why shouldn't you be allowed to breed color variants? Correct?
Not 100%. I think what he said I found very interesting, and I think we concur with that any game ranch, whether you talk about 400 hectares or 10,000 hectares, I think you have a duty of care with your wildlife populations to bring in new blood on occasion, to seed new blood in there. And the place where I hunt, they do it on occasion. They bring in a lot of new eland or waterbuck or impala, whatever they need on that farm, to keep the genetics going, that you don't have inbreeding too much. And that's what Graham Curry told me, the professor at Nelson Mandela University down where I live. The problem in the Karoo is that the springbuck have not been supplemented with good genetics, so they become stunted and they grow smaller and smaller and smaller. So, yes, I agree with you. Any wildlife ranch has to be managed. Our plea is, don't start intervening, hand-picking and selective breeding, because that's domestication. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
There's time for one more question, Lizelle. Lizanne, sorry.
My name is Lizanne Nell. I'm a scientist by training. And I would like to ask Mr. York the following question, is that who is the market that you breed these animals for? And the reason I'm asking that is because you've indicated that from the meat hunting side, there's not an interest in these animals. The Professional Hunters Association indicated that there's not a significant mark in terms of the trophy mark. So the question is then, so who is the market that you breed these animals for? Because what we see currently is people buying to breed, with the expectation that at some point in the future there's going to be a consumer market. But we haven't seen what that consumer market is. And within the last 3 weeks, there's been a ban from Australia on the import of lion trophies from Africa. And the reason for that was because it was said that it's canned hunting that generates these trophies. So the question is, so are we now going to expand that activity to generate a canned hunting industry? Because if we keep on breeding animals in intensive and selective situations, that's what the perception is internationally. The World Trade Tourism Organization has indicated that there's a bigger trend towards responsible tourism, people wanting to see authentic experiences. So even in the international market, there's concern and there's ban on trophies where animals have been bred specifically for that purpose. So can you please give us an indication?
Zanel, question there was basically, to what end are you breeding these colour variants? Is there a market for it? And she cited an example of Australia recently, which banned the importation of certain venisons because it was felt that they related to canned hunting. Richard, your response.
I think the picture there talks for itself. It was discussed in my talk that we said Safari Club International accepts colour variants. They say a black impala is not a subspecies, but a colour phase of the southern impala that was developed by selective breeding. That includes black springbuck, copper springbuck, white springbuck, and white blesbuck. Mr. Van Duren addressed that same question by saying there's not enough of them at the moment to hunt. We are in a herd building phase. It is something that is starting. We hunted a golden gemsbuck and a golden wildebeest last year for a revenue of over 500,000. A revenue that's generating and improving rural development. Something that is crucial and very, very important. Ladies and gentlemen, there's the answer. Talking about hunting colour variants, there's a demand. We just have to develop. And when you talk about industries, we are only focusing on the consumptive hunter. The consumptive hunter, from what I'm gathering, is also opposed to the trophy hunter. We are not talking about ecotourism. We are not talking about the venison market. Let's look at the venison market quickly. The venison market in South Africa is worth 60 to 200 million rand. The venison market of New Zealand is worth 2 billion. We've got an opportunity to grow other markets. There are markets out there that we can look at. When we talk about trophy hunting, we're talking about America. We're talking about Europe a little bit. But are we talking about Russia? Are we talking about China? Are we talking about Korea? There are other markets out there. And do not think that the game rancher is idle-handed, that he'll sit one side and not develop those markets. It is our obligation for the future of this country, for the conservation of this country, and for the conservation of our natural resources to develop these markets, promote wildlife conservation, and develop a sustainable industry for the future of Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Richard. Ladies and gentlemen, as you will gather from this very short presentation this evening, this is a controversial and developing market. It's a topic that affects all of us as game ranchers. The idea of the Waterberg Nature Conservancy this evening was to bring these two gentlemen here and to allow questions from the floor so that you could hear both sides of the argument and form your own opinions. We're not here to tell you what opinions you should form. But we also know that we haven't exhausted this whole subject.